Let me guess. You bought a plugin, you used the shit out of it, you were sold that it was gonna save you all this time, it was gonna transform your mixes, you were finally gonna get that punchy kick drum, that fat snare, those vocals, those guitars that cut through the mix, that chunky bass, and you didn't. You just none of that shit came true. Is that you? It's probably you if you're on this page. Well, we're going to talk about that today. This is Crowkeeper Studios in Sacramento, California, and we're going to talk about if plugins are bullshit and if you should continue to buy them. Here's the thing. I've seen it a million times. You have too. You've probably experienced it. I see it on every plugin manufacturer's page. Somebody talking about how they can't wait to spend more money, can't wait to give that company more of their money. Surely if you found the tone that you're looking for, you would have stopped already. But they can't. It's like crack. They can't stop buying. They just, one after another, they have to have every single guitar amp, model, because they can never get their tone. So instead of actually writing songs, releasing songs, putting shit out, they're just dicking around with tones forever and ever. And they're just in this fucking purgatory where all they do is just remix the same two songs over and over and over again. They never actually release anything. Here's the truth. If you don't have the personality traits that it takes to do mixing, just send it to your local engineer that, is going to get this job done in like one day instead of doing it for weeks and weeks on end, because that part is already, before I even start talking about plugins, sending people down a rabbit hole, which they know they will go down. Your time is worth something. So if you just spend the most of your time dicking around with tones, fucking around with all this bullshit, and you're not getting anywhere, it's just better to have somebody else do the track for you. Somebody with more experience. Because if you're a guitar player, you know this. You've watched a guitar player who's a beginner and their guitar is out of tune, or they played the wrong chord, or this or that, and they didn't notice. They were none the wiser, that young guitar player. That's you. That's you when it comes to mixing. You're that guy. An experienced engineer is hearing shit that you don't hear, and he's hearing an entire line of thinking that you're not thinking whenever you're hearing the same stuff together. And that's just the way it is. But for those who do want to continue going down this rabbit hole, let's talk about this bullshit. This buying these plugins that you assume that no other plugin can do. Now, that is true for a couple of plugins. And I will state there's a couple plugins that are like that, but very, very few. A very small amount of plugins can do something that other plugins cannot do. Especially other plugins that are already within your DAW, whether that's Cubase, Logic, Pro Tools, Reaper, whatever. You're going to be able to find, if you know classical engineering skills, traditional engineering skills, you will be able to solve the vast majority of sonic problems, and you will not have to resort to giving some company another $150 of your money every, like 3-4 months maybe, because, the first one, it did it kind of, but, not really. And so you're just doing it again. You're spending more again. There's so many dudes that have, it's funny. They have spent so much money on amp sims that they could have had a whole row of amps, a whole wall full of amps, the real deal, instead of, digital models on their laptop, which is just fucking insane, man. So here we go. This one I'll start out with is a pretty simple one to me. People are always talking about bleed, cymbal bleed, on drums, whatever. Okay, so here's my snare track. And we're going to listen to it as it is. It's not completely dry because I have a snare bus that has shit on it, a kit bus, and a pre-master, and then some of these are going through some effects channels. They're like inserts. And then finally the stereo out. So this is an older track. This is like 5 years old or 6 years old. It does have a trigger on the kick, which normally these days in this studio for the past several years basically have never been having triggers. But this one is from quite some time ago. So it does have a kick trigger. Just want to state that, because, it's an older track and that's the way I was doing it at that time. But no more. But it's the snare track is raw, and I've historically always done snares and toms raw. But now I just also do the kick raw too. So here we go. Here's a snare that most people would say Saturn II is one of those debleeding tricks that can't be replicated by other means, or mostly other debleeders. A lot of people will say debleeders in general are like these things that have some magic sauce about them. There's just something that other plugins cannot do. So let's just listen to the track without Saturn and then with. So we can hear there's bleed. The bleed is actually considerably less before we add all of these other buses that are compressing and doing parallel compression and all this shit. It's exacerbating the cymbal bleed relative to the transient that we hear as the snare. Because if you are thinking about it the way I do, the cymbals within the kit, within any drum shells recording, it's like the noise floor. So it's your noise floor, and then your snare or any other drum that you happen to be close miking is peaking above that noise floor. That's the way I'm thinking. When we're thinking about stuff, you have to think differently. As an engineer, you're thinking, I'm always thinking problems and then solutions to those problems. These sorts of things, you have to be making, decisions. You got to be doing stuff like that. So here's the problem, the bleed. And here's one of the solutions, something many people would use or have used. I know that Nolly talked about using Saturn II. And so this was one of the things that they did. And, here's one of the solutions. And here's the result of that solution at a moderately strong setting, with the dynamics pulled down quite a bit, so it's gating pretty decently heavily for what this plugin can do. So what's the problem there? There's not exactly a problem with the Saturn plugin, except that it costs money. But let's see, what else can we do here? What is the problem here? Well, the problem is we have this cymbal bleed happening that's only happening in a certain band. If only there was a way to stop that band from playing other than moments that we wanted to play. Well, Cubase has a couple tools. One is the multi-band expander, but that's kind of slow in my experience. It doesn't respond fast enough, so that won't do. But a multi-band shaper will respond fast enough. It will turn down volumes rapidly. So what did I do here? I used the multi-band envelope shaper to turn down the moment when this bleed is happening, when it's happening. So we get this moment, this blip of the attack of the snare. And then for the band that I wanted to cut out, which is, 500, 600, 700 above, we're chopping things down. We're killing that volume, at least in the high end, because we don't need it. That's debleeding, essentially. So let's do that. Let's just add that alone. Oh, and the one thing that's nice about this versus Saturn is we can also add attack. So we can pull up the attack of the snare relative to its noise floor even further apart, which is great. That's one of the things we're looking for. This already feels clearer, but let's take it a step further and just hit it with a normal traditional gate that is also focused on, as a sidechain, the frequencies that are happening around here. So we're getting even more of a clearer transient for the gate to respond. I would say that's a substantially more gated, cleaner sound than the Saturn II. Now, there you go. I mean, there's, it's just the, the proof is in the pudding, man. It's that simple. You don't even need this thing. You don't need it at all because you got these other tools that solve the problem because you understand, or you should understand, what the problem is. So then you're looking for the right tool, because the traditional engineering tools box, essentially, it already has most of the things that it takes to solve all of these problems. You just actually have to know what these problems are in order to get the result that you want to get. Otherwise, you're screwed, and that's just it. You have to understand what the problem is so that way you can reach for the right tool, You don't reach for a hammer when you need a screwdriver. That's not the way it works. You got to know what the problem is, and you got to know your tools and what the tools are capable of, and then you can apply that kind of problem solving to whatever you have out in front of you. And you should be able to kind of do this intuitively. You're hearing the problem, and then you're like thinking, oh, okay, I see what it is. Here's, what tools I can use to solve it, because I know my tool set so thoroughly, So here's another one. Before this compressor, I had another compressor before, which is this VU compressor. And we can see that the D compressor, the black face compressor, it responds differently than the others, especially compared to F. F is very sharp. D is very slow and sluggish in its decay, in its release. And if you like this kind of sound or this kind of sound, these are things that on this kind of compressor, you don't know what the settings are exactly. So if you're thinking, oh man, this sounds awesome, or this sounds awesome, that's great and all, but you don't know how to replicate these settings on a traditional compressor. That's the problem here. Here I can see, oh, this release is slow. Oh, on D, sorry. Oh, okay, it's slow. Well, on a compressor, you may not even know that. You may not even notice what the VU meter is actually doing. Okay, then we want slow, just like on that other compressor. Now, I don't know where exactly these ratios are on that particular compressor, but again, that's the problem, right? The problem is that you don't know. You're just completely blind, you don't even know what the hell is happening under the hood. Whereas if you know true normal compressing skills, if you know traditional engineering skills, you would be able to just do whatever you do. And when it comes to some compressor like this one, you're already kind of getting an idea of what is happening here. Or you'd be able to hear like, oh, this kind of has like a higher ratio than the other one. You would know what's happening in some way under the hood a little bit more thoroughly than if you're a guy that's just flipping around. You're just budging settings around. You're like, I don't know, it sounds good to me, or it sounds as good as I think I can make it. I don't even know what I'm doing here, which is often the case. So, here we go back to the compressor. Of course, I don't want it, to be that kind of slow, but, every snare is different. So you're going to respond to them, react to them differently. Now, I had the same thing on this kick. I had that VU compressor, and I swapped it out for the vintage compressor, which I thought was better. The vintage one is the one that's stock in Cubase. Let's move this down here, and let's throw this VU compressor again. Okay, so let me bring in these guitars, the drum set, the full drum set, and the guitars. And then I'm going to swap out this VU compressor for the vintage one, which I think sounds better. I think it sounds punchier, and it's a stock compressor. And I already did the settings on it. I already did the settings before. So let's just hear, the difference. Okay, so here's something that I can say. There's nothing on Cubase like Drum Leveler. There's nothing on Cubase like Trigger. So you kind of need these plugins that they are doing something that you cannot replicate. They're not part of the traditional engineering skill set, tool set. They're just not. They're different things that are unique to itself. And there are some plugins like that, and there's nothing wrong with using them if that's the case. But the vast majority of the time that people are buying plugins, they're buying a plugin to which they already have some other version of. How many, compressor plugins do you need? And they all sound damn near the same. And most of them are modeled off of the same compressor. So, if you don't even know how a compressor works, why do you need 20 of them? There's just that. Or if you're not getting a great guitar tone out of, a 5150, if you don't even know how to do that, why do you need a wall full of guitar amps or digital guitar amps when you don't even know how to get decent tone out of one? So it's like you don't understand the fundamentals of getting a decent guitar tone. So you're just going to buy more and more and more, and you're not going to accomplish anything. So, that's my thought process on that sort of thing. So let's use the drum leveler again and we'll use it at the very end because I don't know what's, whoops, not this one. Don't need this boy. We need this baby. So I'm going to bring it back into context. We're going to listen to everything with one of the harder parts of the song, and just listen to some of the changes that we made. And, we'll see that for what it is, for what the track is and what state the track is in, it didn't break the track. We just swapped some stuff out, and it didn't matter. That's it. Easy peasy, man. The guitars, they are a real amp, and all they have is, some gate, a little bit of notching. The black valve is a compressor on Cubase, and there it is. It's that simple. Don't buy a bunch of plugins you don't need. I wouldn't recommend it. If you're not seeing major results coming from learning the basic tools, hire somebody else. It's my only advice. Hire somebody else. If you wanted saxophone on your track, it wouldn't make sense to go buy a saxophone, learn how to play it, and then hope that you would become good enough, sufficiently quick, that you'd be able to track it on your music and then release that out into the world. So what makes recording any different? If you want to get a professional sounding recording, the best bet is just to simply hire a professional, because that's where you're going to be able to get the best recording the quickest and often with the least amount of headache. That's just the way it is. So, hire people who dedicate their lives to music production in the same way that you have writing songs. That is usually the best bet. But if you're going to go this route, don't get suckered into buying plugin after plugin after plugin after plugin, and year after year after year, you're not releasing anything because you're just dicking around with this shit, and you're not actually learning traditional classic engineering skills, because that's what's going to solve 95% of your problems. It really is. So there it is. Wasn't the most positive video, but hopefully it helps out some people and prevents them from becoming a sucker and spending a shitload of money that they don't need to on on not getting any results. So there it is. But if you do need some work done, hit myself up or hit up another engineer, and we will do probably an excellent job in a fraction of the time. So there you go.